23 children were watching me pull a rabbit out of a hat that did not have a rabbit in it 30 seconds ago. That's the trick. You spend 20 years learning how to make people believe something is impossible, and then you do it in front of 23 children who are not yet old enough to be cynical about magic, and for about 4 seconds the whole room catches its breath, and the birthday girl makes a sound like the world just became bigger than she thought it was. That 4 seconds is the reason I do this job, not the applause after, not the bookings, not the revenue, though I'll be honest with you, the revenue is real, and I'm proud of it. But the 4 seconds before all of that, when the room is suspended between what just happened and the understanding of what just happened, and the children are still too astonished to have started reacting, that's mine. 22 years of building toward those 4 seconds over and over. I was still inside that moment, the rabbit sitting in my arms, Lily's face radiant at the front of the room, when my son stepped up beside me. He put his hand on my shoulder, warm, proud, the gesture of a father who wants to do something nice. "Isn't she great?" he said to the room. "She's actually Lily's grandma. We just had her fill in today because our regular entertainer canceled." 23 children, 14 parents, my daughter-in-law Sasha near the cake table, and my son, grinning, satisfied with himself for the smooth recovery, like explaining away a professional, was a thing you did when you wanted to make the professional feel seen. I kept smiling. The rabbit was still in my arms. The show was not done. And I had about 40 minutes and 3 more tricks left before I would say a single word to Ryan about what he'd just said. But here's the thing about being a magician for 22 years. You learn that the reveal is everything. The trick itself is just the setup. The moment when what was hidden becomes visible. That's what people remember. Ryan had just handed me the best reveal of my career. He didn't know it yet. Before I tell you how the next 45 minutes went, do something for me. If you have ever done real skilled work and had someone apologize for you to the people watching, subscribe to this channel right now. Every story here is for the person who built something real and got introduced as the backup plan. Hit subscribe, then come back, because what happened after that rabbit trick is the kind of thing that only lands if you've been sitting with it for 22 years. My name is Margot Vance. I was 54 that year, and I had been a professional children's entertainer since I was 32, which means I have spent 22 years being chronically underestimated by adults while being taken completely seriously by children, which is, I have come to understand, the correct distribution. I found out because the roommate's mother told me at a university parents' weekend, thinking it was funny. I thought about it for a while, and decided he'd come to understand it eventually. That was my mistake, the same one I've watched myself make in different forms over 22 years. I decided to wait for understanding to arrive on its own, and understanding almost never arrives on its own. It needs an invitation, or an interruption. I spent 22 years waiting for an invitation. What I got was an interruption at a birthday party, and that will have to be enough. The pattern, in the years between Ryan at 19 and Lily's party, was consistent in the way that patterns are when nobody's paying attention to them. He'd come to birthday parties and watch the show and say I was great and go home. He'd mention to people, "My mother does magic at kids' parties," in the tone of someone sharing a charming detail about an eccentric relative, rather than describing a professional with 6 employees and hotel contracts. When Lily was born, I rearranged the company schedule so I could be present for the first month. Ryan didn't ask what the company was. He just said, "Thanks, Mom. It means a lot." Each of those moments was an invitation that I let pass without answering. He didn't know to ask. I didn't know how to offer without performing modesty badly. And so the gap between the performer he watched and the professional he'd never examined stayed exactly as wide as it had been when he was 19 and talking to his college roommate, until Lily's 7th birthday, until the rabbit, until my son stood up in a room full of parents and explained me away. I want to tell you what my company actually is, because Ryan clearly didn't know, and possibly you don't either. And the rest of this story only makes sense if you have the full picture. I didn't start as a magician. My first magic show was a birthday party for a colleague's daughter. A favor. Claudette had seen me do card tricks at too many teacher happy hours and decided the children would love it. I showed up with a bag of props I'd assembled from a magic supply store and a library book and the knowledge that I'd performed for 0 children professionally and had about 90 minutes to figure out how to fix that. It went fine. More than fine. 28 children in a living room, and when the coin disappeared the 3rd time, a boy in the front row stood up. Just stood up, without being asked, because his body had run out of ways to hold in what he was feeling. His mother laughed and sat him back down, and then laughed again at herself. I drove home that night thinking about that boy, about the specific quality of attention in children, which is unself-conscious in a way that adult attention almost never is. Adults clap for things. Children respond with their whole bodies. I had spent 9 years trying to earn that kind of response from 5th graders on a Tuesday morning, and here it had happened in someone's living room over a disappearing coin. I called Claudette when I got home and asked if she knew anyone else who needed an entertainer. She gave me 3 names. I called all 3 that week. 4 months later, I had 12 parties on the calendar alongside my full-time teaching job, which meant I was going to school at 7, teaching until 3, driving to parties on weekends and some weeknights, developing new material in the hour between dinner and sleep, and being, according to every person around me, either impressive or insane, depending on how they felt about sleep. My mother, who had raised me to believe that you find the thing you're good at and you build it, said impressive. Claudette, who loved me and worried about me, said both. My then-husband said you're not going to quit teaching for this, and I said I don't know yet, and he said you're going to quit teaching for this, and he was right. The year I left teaching at 41 was the year Margot's magic crossed 6 figures for the first time. It was also the year Ryan, who was 19, told his college roommate that his mom had quit her job to do birthday parties, which he said in the tone of someone explaining something mildly embarrassing. I found out because the roommate's mother told me at a university parents' weekend, thinking it was funny. I thought about it for a while and decided he'd come to understand it eventually. I want you to hold on to this part, because it's where the birthday party story actually started, not the day of. Not Ryan's hand on my shoulder. It started with 19-year-old Ryan talking to his roommate, deciding that what his mother did was a mildly embarrassing quirk rather than a deliberate and skilled career choice. That understanding calcified over the next 22 years because I never pushed back on it, and he never pushed into it, and there we were at Lily's 7th birthday. I started as a teacher, 5th grade, 9 years of it, at a school in the eastern part of the city where the classrooms were too hot in September and too cold in January, and the budgets meant you improvised constantly. What 9 years of 5th grade teaches you, if you're paying the right kind of attention to the teaching, is that attention itself is not a given. You earn it, minute to minute, through the quality of what you offer. A room of 10-year-olds will tell you very directly whether you are interesting, not with words, with their bodies, the lean in or the drift, the eyes sharpening or glazing. I became extremely good at recognizing the glaze before it fully arrived, and doing something that disrupted it before the room was lost. A question, a change of pace, something they didn't expect. The moment they didn't know what was coming next, the attention came back. It turned out that the classroom and the magic show run on identical principles. In both, you appear to be doing one thing, and you're actually doing another. In teaching, you appear to be delivering information, but you're managing the relationship between curiosity and material. In magic, you appear to be doing an impossible thing, but you're managing the relationship between attention and surprise. The hand is not faster than the eye. The eye is just looking in the wrong place. I'd been doing card tricks as a party trick since college. At teacher happy hours, I'd do things with a deck of cards that made colleagues stop mid-drink. My friend Claudette thought the children would love it. 30 children, a living room, a bag of props I'd bought the weekend before. I was nervous in the specific way of someone doing something new in front of an audience that has no mercy, which is to say, children. The nervousness dissolved in about 4 minutes. 28 children in a living room, and when the coin disappeared the third time, a boy in the front row stood up without being asked. Just stood up, because his body had run out of ways to contain what he was feeling. His mother laughed and sat him back down. Then she laughed again because she couldn't stop. I drove home that night thinking about that boy, about the quality of a child's attention, which is unself-conscious in a way. Adult attention almost never manages to be. Adult clap. Children respond with their whole bodies. I had spent 9 years earning that response from 5th graders on Tuesday mornings, and here it had arrived in a living room over a vanishing coin. I called Claudette when I got home and asked who else she knew who needed an entertainer. She gave me 3 names. I called all 3 that week. 4 months later, I had 12 parties on the calendar alongside my full-time teaching job, which meant I was at school at 7, teaching until 3, building new routines late at night, and being described by everyone who knew me as either impressive or insane, depending on their relationship with sleep. My mother said impressive. Claudette said both. She was right. I left teaching at 41. Margot's Magic launched as a real company, with a website and a booking system that same week. I gave myself 18 months. It became clear inside the first 6 months that I would not need them all. I did 4 more parties that year, then 10 the year after. Then the calls were coming faster than I could answer them during school hours, and I was staying up too late building new routines, and I had a conversation with myself one Sunday afternoon that lasted about 3 hours, and ended with me deciding I was going to find out how far this could actually go. I left teaching at 41. Margot's Magic launched as a real company, with a website and a booking system that same week. I had enough money saved to give it 18 months before I'd have to reconsider. It became clear inside the first 6 months that I would not need to reconsider. By the time I turned 50, Margot's Magic had a staff of 6 performers, a full equipment inventory that took 2 vans to transport, and contracts with 3 hotel chains for regular children's programming. We did birthday parties, school shows, library residencies, corporate family events, hospital wing performances, and once, memorably, a magic show for the children of delegates at an international conference, 41 kids from 9 countries, who between them spoke 14 languages. And the thing about magic is that it doesn't need translation. The year before Lily's party, we'd grossed a little over $400,000. Ryan knew I did magic shows. He knew in the way people know things they've never had to sit down and think about, which is loosely and without detail. He'd come to Lily's last 2 birthday parties where I performed, said I was so good at this, eaten cake, gone home. He'd never once asked what the company was called, or how many people worked for me, or what a hotel contract meant, or how long I'd been doing it. He also, apparently, had hired someone else first. That was the part I learned while I was setting up. I'd arrived at the venue, a rented party space with a small stage area and a backstage curtain that was actually a folding screen someone had upgraded with better hardware, 2 hours early, the way I always do. 2 hours early is not standard in this industry. For me, it's non-negotiable. The space needs to be mapped, the props need to be positioned exactly, the lighting needs to be understood, and the sightlines from the children's seating area need to be checked so that no one in the front row is blocked. You would be surprised how many professional entertainers skip this and wonder why certain tricks don't land. The party coordinator, a young woman named Bex who'd been organized and warm on the phone, met me at the door looking slightly relieved in the way of someone who has been worried about a thing and is glad it resolved. "We're so glad you could come," she said. "The original act canceled this morning. Ryan mentioned his mom did parties and I said, well, let's see if she's available." She said it with complete good faith. Ryan had not told her what he'd later say to the room, but the framing was already embedded in how she'd said it. His mom does parties, not his mother owns a professional entertainment company. His mom does parties. I unloaded the vans. which that day I was doing solo because my second performer was at a school show across the city, and I set up without letting anything show on my face. That too is a transferable skill. The show went beautifully for its first 44 minutes. Children's shows go beautifully when the performer knows what she's doing, and after 22 years, I know what I'm doing in specific and reliable ways. I know that the first 5 minutes are about establishing trust, which in children's entertainment means silliness before skill, the kind of deliberately obvious failure that makes children feel they're smarter than the magician before they find out they aren't. I know that the middle section needs 2 different paces, fast and slow, because 7-year-olds can't sustain attention at one speed. I know that the big trick needs to come 3/4 of the way through, not at the end, because after the big trick you need 4 minutes of come down before the finale, and if you put the big trick last, the children are still in the adrenaline when they're supposed to be applauding. The rabbit trick was the big trick. Lily shrieked when it appeared, a full-body shriek, and the room went that particular loud silent that only children can make. And then Ryan's hand on my shoulder. Isn't she great? She's actually Lily's grandma. We just had her fill in today because our regular entertainer canceled. 14 parents heard it. My daughter-in-law Sasha, near the cake table, who had the grace to look quickly down at the tablecloth. 23 children, who did not parse it at all because they were looking at the rabbit. I kept smiling. I looked at Lily, who was at the front, and whose face was the face of a child who believes her grandmother might actually be magic. I kept smiling, because the show was not done, and the show comes first. That has always been the rule. The show comes first. Should we see what else is in the hat? I said. 23 voices said yes with everything they had. I'm going to tell you what that sounded like from inside the trick. It sounded like, this woman standing here is not the real thing. The real thing would have been someone else. What you're watching is improvised family loyalty rather than professional skill. You're welcome that we managed it. Here is what made it particularly strange. The parents in that room had just watched a seamless 44-minute show. They'd watched 23 children go collectively silent at a rabbit. They'd watched the room build and breathe and land in exactly the places it was supposed to land. The work was visible in the room. You didn't need to be told it was professional grade because the room was telling you. And then Ryan told them it wasn't. That is the specific quality of a certain kind of dismissal. It doesn't arise from what you observed. It arises from what you decided before you observed anything, and the deciding is so deep and so old that observation doesn't touch it. Ryan had decided at 19 that his mother did birthday parties, the mildly charming kind, and 22 years of shows hadn't changed that decision because he'd never actually examined it. He just watched the shows through the 19-year-old's frame, and they always looked the same. I kept smiling. I looked at the 23 children who did not care one bit about his explanation because they had just watched a rabbit appear from nothing, and nothing Ryan had said changed that. Then I looked at Lily, who was 7 and had known me her whole life, and whose face in that moment was the face of a child who loved her grandmother and also thought her grandmother might be the most magical person in any room. Should we see what else is in the hat? I said. 23 voices said yes with everything they had. I did not look at Ryan. The show ran 40 more minutes. Not because I padded it, but because when a show is going well, you let it breathe. The silk scarves, which seem simple and aren't. The disappearing coin across the hands of 3 children I'd brought up from the audience, which requires more individual attention than any trick I do, because children are unpredictable participants, and you have to be 3 steps ahead of them at all times. And then the card trick, my favorite, the one I spent 3 years developing the mechanism for, where I asked Lily to choose a card, look at it, show it to no one, and put it back anywhere in the deck. I shuffled. Lily and I both cut the deck. I handed it to her father, who had been slightly too loud in his skepticism, which I had noticed and factored in. Open that envelope, I said to Ryan, pointing to a sealed envelope that had been sitting on the front table since before any guests arrived. He opened it. Inside was a single card. He looked at it. He looked at Lily. He looked at the deck in his own hands. "That's my card," Lily said, very quietly. The room erupted. The finale I won't describe in detail, professional habit, but it involved the whole room rather than just watching someone at the front, and left children with the feeling that they were part of the magic rather than watching someone else do it. That distinction matters more than most people realize. The audience that feels included leaves different from the audience that feels observed. At the end, Lily ran up and hugged me around the middle, both arms, the way she's hugged me since she was tall enough to reach, with real force in it. "Grandma," she said into my sweater, "you're the best magician." "I know," I said, which made her laugh. The parents were clapping, the kind that means the thing actually worked. A woman near the back came over with the specific posture of someone who has made a decision. "My son turns 6 in March," she said. "Do you have a card?" I gave her the real one. Margot's Magic, the company logo, the website, the booking email. She looked at it properly. "Oh, you have a whole company," she said. "I do," I said. Behind me, I could feel Ryan register this. He'd come to stand near the edge of the stage area, Lily's hand in his now, and I did not look at him yet, because the timing wasn't right. And in magic, as in everything, the timing is everything. 4 more parents came up in the next 10 minutes. A father of twins wanting something for a combined party in summer, a mother who pulled up the website on her phone while standing in front of me, a woman from a company who'd been looking for something different for their annual family picnic, who took a photo of the card and said her event coordinator would call Monday. Ryan stood at the edge of the stage and watched all of it with the face of a man doing arithmetic he hadn't expected to be doing at a 7-year-old's birthday party. When the last parent had moved away, I began packing up. I have a system for it, everything back in its designated place in a specific order, hatches secured, the kind of packing that only looks effortless because I've done it several hundred times. It takes 19 minutes when nothing goes wrong. Ryan came up while I was on minute 4. He didn't say anything immediately. He stood there in the way people stand when they're composing something, and know they should have composed it before they needed it. "Mom," he finally said. "Help me with this latch," I said. "It sticks on this side." He helped with the latch, pressing it the wrong way first and then the right way, the way people do when they're not really paying attention to the latch. Then he stood there again. "I didn't know," he said. "Which part?" I said, not unkindly. Still packing. "That it was, that you were. I knew you did parties. I didn't know it was an actual company. I didn't know people paid you. Like, paid you properly. I thought it was more of a hobby thing you'd turned into a side job." "A hobby thing?" I kept packing for a moment. Then I set down what I was holding and looked at my son. Ryan is 41. He has his father's eyes and my habit of talking faster when he's nervous, and he was talking fast now. He looked like a man who has just stepped on something he didn't see on the floor and is taking stock of what broke. He is a good man. He is also a man who has been paying partial attention to me for 22 years and had no idea how much he was missing, because partial attention feels complete from the inside. "Ryan," I said, "I gross $400,000 a year. I have 6 performers on staff. I have hotel contracts with 3 properties. I do library residencies, school shows, hospital wing performances. When Lily was born, I hired a second performer, specifically so I could step back and be with your family for her first month, without the business collapsing. I have been doing this for 22 years. It has never, not for one single week, been a hobby." He absorbed that, the way news absorbs when it reorganizes something large. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. "I have told you," I said, "multiple times, in different conversations, at different points. And every time, you've said something like, 'I didn't know you were still doing that,' or, 'That's so great, Mom,' and then moved on. You heard it, and it didn't stick, because you hadn't decided to pay attention to it. That's not the same as me not telling you." He didn't argue that. "Good. What you said to the room tonight," I said. "We just had her fill in. She's Lily's grandma. That communicated to every parent in there that what they'd just watched was improvised family loyalty, not professional skill. That the real entertainer would have been better. That I was a substitute, not the thing itself. 4 of those parents came up afterward to book me, which means the show was good enough to overcome what you said, but you didn't know that when you said it. You announced to a room full of potential clients that I was the backup plan. "I'm sorry," he said, plainly, without building up to it or softening it or attaching a defense to it. Just the apology. "I know you are," I said, "and I accept it. But here's what I need from you going forward. I need you to know what I do. Not the concept, the actual thing. The next show I do, I want you there. You watch it properly, and after, you ask me one real question. What the business is, how something works, something you actually want to know. You do that, and we're building something real instead of working around the gap." He nodded. "When's the next one?" "Thursday," I said. "Library residency. 2 shows, 30 kids each. Bring coffee, it's a morning." He came on Thursday. The library was a branch in a neighborhood I'd worked in for 4 years, and the children's librarian there, a woman named Deb, introduced me the way Deb always introduces me, which is with the specific warmth of someone who has watched what happens to a room of children when I walk in. She said, "This is Margot. She's been doing shows here since before most of you were born," and the kids laughed, and the show started. Ryan sat in the back, not with the parents in the parent section, but behind them slightly, where he could see both the children and me at the same time. I noticed him adjust his position in the first 5 minutes to get a better angle. He did not take out his phone, not for the first show, and not for the second. After the second show, walking to the parking lot, he was quiet for most of the walk. Then he asked about the envelope trick, how long it took to develop, why I chose it for the card section instead of something faster. I told him. The 3 years of working it out, the specific problem of the sealed envelope, and the mechanism I'd found for solving it, why the best card tricks give the audience a decision to make, and then honor that decision rather than routing around it. He asked follow-up questions, real ones, that came from what I'd said rather than from a list. It was not a transformation. Transformations are for stories where people change fully and cleanly in a short amount of time, and those aren't real stories. This was a start, which is what real change looks like from the beginning of it. He came to another show a month later, his choice, without being asked. He told Sasha afterward what Margot's magic actually was. She texted me that night and said she'd always wondered how busy you actually were. I texted back, "Very." She sent a laughing face. I sent one back. Lily, who is 7 and knows nothing about any of this, has started telling her friends that her grandmother is a professional magician, not her grandmother who does magic at parties. Her grandmother, the professional magician, she made the distinction herself, apparently, at school, after a friend said their parents had hired a magician for their birthday, and Lily said, "My grandma is one," and the friend said like a real one, and Lily said very clearly, "Yes." Ryan told me that story on the phone, and his voice had something in it, telling it, that I hadn't heard in a while, something that sounded like finally seeing something he'd been looking at without seeing for a long time. That was enough. That was, actually, quite a lot. Ryan came to another show a month later, his choice, without being asked. He told Sasha afterward what Margot's magic actually was, the full picture, and she texted me that night. "I'd always wondered how busy you actually were," she wrote. I texted back, "Very." She sent a laughing face and I sent one back, and something between us that had been slightly uncertain for years quietly settled. Lily came over the Sunday after her birthday, the way she does most Sundays, for what she calls grandma time, which involves watching me practice new tricks in the living room and being a test audience. She is my most honest reviewer. She will tell me immediately if something is boring, with a specific look on her face that I recognize from the children in my shows who are losing attention before they've quite lost it. She has no idea she's doing this. She just has good instincts. That Sunday, she sat on the couch with a glass of juice and watched me work through the mechanics of a new trick I'd been developing, a scarf routine that I wasn't happy with yet in its current form. She watched for about 10 minutes, then said, "It's almost right." "What's missing?" I asked. She thought about it, juice glass in both hands, very serious. "You rush the part at the end. The last part needs to be slower." She was right. 7 years old, and she was right, because she'd been watching magic in my living room since she was old enough to sit still, and the patterns had gotten into her. I slowed the ending. We ran it again. She nodded. "Better," she said. "Now it's right." "Good," I said. "You want to see the rabbit?" She did. She always does. After the rabbit, when I was putting things away, she said, without looking up from petting the rabbit, "Daddy told me about what happened at my party, that he said the wrong thing about you." I kept putting things away. "What did he tell you?" "That you're a real magician, and he didn't know, and he should have." She paused. "That's kind of weird. You've always been a real magician." "Yes," I said. "Did it make you sad when he said it wrong?" I thought about how to answer that honestly to a 7-year-old. "It made me feel like I'd been not quite seen for a while," I said, "which is a little sad and a little tiring, but your dad is fixing it." She considered this. "Then, I always knew you were real." "I know you did, baby," I said. She went back to the rabbit. I went back to packing. That was the part I didn't expect. Not Ryan's apology, not the library show, not the Tuesday calls, though all of those mattered. It was my granddaughter, 7 years old, who had never once needed to be told I was real, looking up at me from the couch, as if the idea that anyone had needed convincing was a little bit puzzling. She'd been watching, properly, the whole time. Here's what I'd leave you with, and I'll keep it plain, because plain lands better than complicated. Being underestimated is not the same as being invisible. When you're invisible, people truly don't see you. When you're underestimated, they see a version of you they've decided is complete. The difference matters because the fix is different. Invisible needs to be seen, underestimated needs to be witnessed, and witnessing requires an active decision from the person doing the seeing. You cannot witness someone accidentally. You have to choose to pay the kind of attention that updates your picture of who they are. Ryan had been present for 22 years of my work. He'd applauded, he'd said I was great, he'd meant it. But presence and witnessing are not the same thing, and the gap between them is the entire distance between being proud of your parent in a warm, vague way and actually knowing who your parent is. His hand on my shoulder was the interruption, not the way he meant it, as a kind introduction, the way it had to happen, which was a rupture in the picture he'd been keeping, finally large enough to force the update. The update happened. That's the part I hold on to. Not the rupture. The update. He sat in the back of a library on a Thursday morning with his coffee, and he watched 2 shows without checking his phone, and afterward he asked a real question. That is what changing looks like at the start of it. Slow, specific, and mostly invisible to anyone watching from the outside, but real. I've been thinking about the difference between Lily and Ryan. She's 7. She's watched magic in my living room since she was old enough to sit still. She has never, not once, needed to be told I was real. She walks into my house and goes straight to the equipment bags before she even takes off her coat. She asks what we're working on. She sits on the couch and gives me notes, and her notes are good. Ryan is 41. He watched 22 years of the same work and needed an interruption to update his picture. The difference is not intelligence. Ryan is smart. The difference is that Lily came to me without a frame. She has never had a 19-year-old's idea of what her grandmother was. She just saw what was in front of her, show after show, and assembled an accurate picture from it. Ryan came with a frame he'd built at 19 and never took down to look at it properly. The frame did the looking for him. That's what frames do. They save you the trouble of looking, and they cost you the accuracy. Lily doesn't know she's doing anything differently from Ryan. She just watches, properly, because she hasn't yet learned not to. I hope she keeps that for a long time. I hope something in this lands somewhere useful for you, and if you've made it all the way through this story, you know what to do. Subscribe to this channel. Every story here is for the person who did the actual skilled work and got introduced as the fill-in, the backup, the grandmother who's pretty good with kids. Hit the button right now, because that person deserves to be the main character, and this is the place where that happens. My name is Margot. I am not a hobby. I am not a fill-in. I'm the person who made a rabbit appear from nowhere in front of 23 children, and not one of them needed to be told it was real. The ones who need telling aren't watching closely enough.